Now, just so there's no misunderstanding, let me just put this here. Come at me, bro. Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to discuss the portion of Robert Iger's new book, The Ride of a Lifetime, in which he details how he hornswoggled and bamboozled George Lucas. Now I snagged these screenshots from Data Racer 117 on Twitter. If you're not following him, you really should. Now in this video we're going to briefly look at the portions of the book that were leaked, and I'm also going to reference the interview that George Lucas gave to Charlie Rose. And I think when you put these two together, you're going to see both sides of the same story that paints this picture of, if not betrayal, then definitely some misleading going on the part of Bob Iger.
I had made a decision to move ahead on the next Star Wars series, and we were starting to do that.
So you were starting to make the next Star Wars?
Yeah.
You as director, filmmaker.
So, and we were working with a writer. It wasn't quite working out, but I was also... I was also stepping away a little bit and turning things over to Kathy Kennedy. And so what happened was Disney said, Bob Iger said, if you really want to sell your company, if you're thinking about selling it, because we were talking about retirement and what are you going to do after all this kind of stuff. And he said, well, if you really want to sell it, we're very interested. So that started that ball rolling.
Okay, so there you go, George Lucas kind of setting the stage for us. We get an idea as far as where he was mentally, where he was as far as handing over control of the company, transitioning out of the company maybe, letting go of some of that control, some of that responsibility. And him and Bob Iger discussing their future plans, retirement. Maybe they were sitting around having a few drinks. Maybe it was a casual environment, a casual setting. And of course, Bob Iger, being the opportunistic guy, is a CEO of a major company. I don't fault him for that at all. Sees an opportunity. Maybe he can buy Star Wars. So continuing on in the book, Bob Iger talks about George's new role of creative authority. And he says that, I knew I was going to stand firm in the question of creative control, but it wasn't an easy thing for George Lucas to accept. And so he reluctantly agreed to be available to consult with us at our request. I promised that we would be open to his ideas. Okay, so the misleading is continuing. You can see how George Lucas would assume that things were going, as far as structurally, these movies were going to go in the way that he intended. Of course, but in parentheses, this was not a hard promise to make, of course, because we would be open to George Lucas's ideas. He's even acknowledging in this book that it's an easy thing to say because George Lucas, he created all this. His ideas are gold, right? But like the outlines, we would be under no obligation. Once again, more fine print.
I always said I wasn't going to do any more, and that's true, because I'm not going to do any more. But that doesn't mean I'm unwilling to turn it over to Kathy to do more. Mm-hmm. I have story treatments of 7, 8, and 9, and a bunch of other movies, and obviously we have hundreds of books and comics and everything you could possibly imagine. So, I sort of moved that treasure trove of stories and various things to Kathy, and I have complete confidence that she's going to take them and make great movies.
We are absolutely going to make Star Wars movies, and we're in the midst of the really fun part of the process, which is we're sitting down with a couple of writers, and we're starting to discuss ideas, and we're starting to talk about what those stories might be. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to be entirely
like, what do you mean what those stories might be? I gave you the ideas.
That he at least continue to be the little guardian angel on my shoulder, helping me do this.
They're finishing the hologram now. Don't worry.
Yeah. My Yoda has to be there.
I'm doing this so that the films will have a longer life, and so that more fans and people can enjoy them into the future. It's a very big universe I've created, and there's a lot of stories that are sitting in there.
The main thing is to protect these characters. Make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them, and that the universe of Star Wars continues.
Early on, Kathy brought JJ and Michael up to North California to meet with George at his ranch and talk about their ideas for the film. George immediately got upset as they began to describe the plot, and it dawned on him that we weren't using one of the stories he submitted during the negotiations.
Disney, who was a little nervous. There's one of the issues was the first three movies had all kinds of issues. They looked at the stories and they said, we want to make something for the fans. They wanted to do a retro movie. I don't like that. Every movie I worked very hard to make them different. I make them completely different with, different planets, with different spaceships, with different, to make it.
Why did you do that? Why didn't you just email him? Why didn't you just call him and say, just let him down easy. Don't make a big show of it. I mean, this is disrespectful. I don't know if they were trying to soften the blow by going up there and sitting with him and discussing it with him, but it's like, I mean, why? Why even have him involved in this way? The truth was, Kathy, J.J. Allen, and I had discussed the direction in which the saga should go, and we all agreed that it wasn't what George Allen. When did you agree that? I'm just curious. George knew we weren't contractually bound. Did he, though? To anything, but he thought that our buying the story treatments was a promise that we'd follow them. Yeah, I mean, there was an assumption made there. Maybe it wasn't a legal assumption or a legal assertion, but it was still a reasonable assumption. Probably what he thought at the time was sort of an agreement between two friends. I mean, I don't see how anyone should be surprised that George Lucas thought you were going to use his ideas for this new sequel trilogy. And he was disappointed that his story was being discarded. Of course he was. Why wouldn't he be? These stories, these movies, this was his baby.
Are you at peace with this?
Yeah.
As much as you can be.
Yeah. No, I said, look, I'm fine.
And so in that paragraph, Bob Iger goes on to say that I'd been so careful since our first conversation not to mislead him in any way, and didn't think I had now, but I could have handled it better. I should have prepared him for the meeting with JJ and Michael and told him about our conversations, that we felt it was better to go in a different direction. I could have talked through this with him and possibly avoided angering him by not surprising him. You think? Now, in the first meeting with him about the future of Star Wars, George felt betrayed. That's sad to hear. And while this whole process would have never been easy for him, we'd gotten off to an unnecessarily rocky start. Clearly, it was a sensitive situation. You're negotiating basically the purchase of $4 billion of intellectual property, something that's been a part of George's life for 40 years. So I understand that it was a sensitive issue, a sensitive transition. But to carefully consider his story treatments and ideas is one thing. To take those story ideas, story treatments, those outlines, purchase those, have him on as a consultant, and then to bring a different creative team in, but yet still have Kathleen Kennedy there, and have that group decide to just throw everything away and completely go in a different direction, knowing that, I mean, he had passed all this to Kathleen. I mean, that was what he decided to do. She was supposed to be the representative of Lucasfilm. She was supposed to be the old guard, and to have her also in that mix, to say, yeah, let's just throw it all away and start over. I would feel betrayed, wouldn't you? I think betrayal is pretty accurate, given what we know. Looking at all the interviews, looking at things now, and now getting Bob Iger's perspective. I do applaud some of his candor, the fact that he's willing to throw it out there. So on that, I'll tip my hat to him. But beyond that, you took what was successful from a man and destroyed it. George Lucas's ideas made those films what they were. He built this whole universe. You should have taken his outlines. I'm not saying point for point. I mean, these weren't scripts. George says they're outlines. So take the outlines and go from there. Allow that structure to be what it is. Allow yourselves to be guided by George Lucas and do your thing. Have him consult. Differ in different ways, nuance, subtlety, sure. Have your creative stamp on it here and there. But what I don't understand is that Disney is perfectly fine with just buying properties up and just letting them ride. Why did they feel the need to just distort and change Star Wars? The only thing I can think of is that they wanted this brand to continue on beyond just the 3 films. So they thought that they needed to take this in a different direction to where it had a longer future, more toys, more merchandising, and all that. And maybe George was going to wrap this up completely, truly, and honestly, wrap it up in the Skywalker saga for good. And maybe they didn't want that. So seeing episode 9, George's episode 9, as a finality, maybe they didn't want to do that. They thought that they could go in a different direction and continue this on. The funny thing is, because it is failing so poorly, they've returned to what they've run away from. And 9 is now the end of the Skywalker saga. If no other reason than just to try to drive people to the theaters to watch this thing. Because at this point, that's the only thing that's going to get them there, is the novelty of, well, it's the last one. And that's it. So it's sad to see George disappointed, feeling betrayed. I think it hurts all Star Wars fans because the two were so closely associated, George Lucas and Star Wars. But I hope that we can move on. I hope that we can put this to bed, enjoy what was, dig back into the EU, with the hopes that maybe you'll have sparks of brilliance. Maybe The Mandalorian will be good. Maybe the Obi-Wan Kenobi series will be good. We can have a little bit of hope there. But I can't help feeling, and I think for most of the people watching this, I can't help but feel that hurt at the missed opportunity, truly a missed opportunity with these 3 films. To have all 3 back, Han, Luke, and Leia, in some capacity on screen together, was just something that personally I wanted to see, and maybe that's my fault. Maybe I shouldn't impose my will on the filmmakers. Maybe I'm just the problem. Maybe this 40-year-old white guy, these films aren't made for me. So anyway, y'all, those are my thoughts on this. What do you think? Tell me in the comments section down below. Like the video if you like it. Subscribe if you enjoy the content. Y'all have a blessed day, and I will see you next time.